Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. We're kicking off season 5 of our Global Energy Transition series. As we've done in the past, we will continue to explore key energy trends to bring you the latest analysis and insight. And today we're exploring data center energy strategies across the US and Europe. I'm Tom Warren. I'm the co-head of our global energy team here at Eversheds Sutherland. In a minute, I'll hand it over to my colleague, Alex Franklin, who will briefly run through some data center key trends that we're seeing currently. And then after that short presentation, we're going to jump into a panel discussion moderated by my colleague, Rob Donnell. And we're delighted to be joined by VT Lynette from Digital Realty. Just quick introductions there. VT is responsible for energy risk management for Digital Realty in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. And Rob is a London-based partner focused on data center development, working across development, investment, and customer contracting throughout Europe. So quickly, in terms of housekeeping, we are recording today, and it will be shared with you with a follow-up email and will be available on our website. If you do have questions during the presentation, there is a Q&A function. This is only a 30-minute session. We may or may not be able to get to all the questions live. If we don't get to your question live, we will follow up with you. With that, I will turn it over to Alex.
Hi there. As Tom said, my name is Alex Franklin. I'm an associate here in the Atlanta office in the US for Eversheds Sutherland. We represent clients on both sides of this transactions with regard to data centers. So that's both utilities and data centers and everywhere in between. So I'm going to highlight some high-level key themes that we've been seeing in both the US and the European market when we assist our clients on these arrangements. The first one is really contracting for unknown risks. Given really the nascency of the space, our clients, both data centers and utilities, are very concerned and aware of how to address the questions about how all of this is going to pan out in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Utilities are concerned that data centers are going to contract for hundreds of megawatts of load and then either A, abandon their facility or go bankrupt years down the road. And in that scenario, they'd be leaving the utility with an incredible amount of stranded costs, which creates potential impacts for other retail customers. Data centers, on the other hand, are often concerned about things like change in law and whether governments will create restrictions on data centers that either dramatically increase their costs or ban their facilities outright, leaving them in a contract that they really can't perform under. Utilities are also really working on to address the potential significant load fluctuations that could appear with these large loads, and the potential grid stability implications that could come with that as well. The sheer size of these loads obviously is unprecedented, so the risk here for the utilities is similar. In the agreements that we negotiate, we do attempt our best to address these risks and mitigate them as much as we can on behalf of our clients. The next trend that we're seeing pretty often is unique power supply solutions. The sheer scale of the data center, what I like to call revolution, has put significant constraints on power supply. We're finding that utilities are often 5 or more years out from additional generation in some circumstances, and transmission upgrades can be on similar timeframes. This means that we're often coming up with really unique or bespoke models on how to address these constraints for our clients. So that might look like an arrangement where the data center brings their own resource to the table to serve their load, whether through a sleeved arrangement or otherwise, as well as behind the meter resources to either reduce their load in reliance on the system. We're also seeing what I like to call power supply tranches or modular approaches to power supply in terms of retail service. So that's a scenario where the utility and the customer have line of sight to power and transmission in the short term. So they're willing to contract for an increment of what the data center expects their full load to be, with the expectation that in the future, as they are able to realize either the generation or the transmission, that they can expand that obligation in the future. And then finally, another kind of broad trend we're seeing is that lots of clients have varying approaches to renewables. Many states and countries in the EU have put their RPS or renewable requirements front and center in terms of these agreements, and are requiring that these be addressed in the power supply arrangements. Some data centers, however, in areas where there is no mandate or requirement that they have renewables, have set their own ESG goals front and center and when negotiating these retail agreements. Others, though, are less concerned with the source of their power or are comfortable with addressing their carbon goals through other avenues, such as direct REC purchases. With these ESG goals comes the complexity of addressing putting renewables on the grid in a scenario where the data center has a significantly high load factor at all times during the day. So our clients are working to address that risk as well. And that is all I had in terms of themes.
Thank you very much, Alex. As Tom mentioned at the beginning, for the balance of the webinar, we're going to have a discussion. So I'll ask a few questions of VT and Tom about strategies for grid connection and supply in the constrained markets that we're seeing across Europe and the US. Just firstly, Tom, for the benefit of our European listeners, Alex alluded to it a little bit there. Would you mind summarizing how the grid networks behave in the US and a little bit around how supply is procured?
Sure, I'll just give a quick overview. I mean, in the US, it's marked by private ownership of transmission and distribution. There are a few federally owned entities, but generally it's going to be by by private ownership of both transmission and distribution. Transmission is going to be regulated at the federal level, but then distribution, which is where the retail contract with the data center is going to come in, is performed at the state level through many private entities, private utilities, whether investor owned or in rural areas cooperatively owned. And then the interconnection is going to be handled by the local utility. And then power supply is going to depend on state to state. In many states, it's regulated, and so the local utility is again going to be the sole supplier of a data center. And then in other states, there's competitive sources of supply in the US.
Great, thank you. I suppose stating the obvious here, but the difference, the big distinction there is that in Europe it's much more fragmented. VT, how does this affect your procurement strategy in terms of grid connection across Europe?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me with you guys today. It's very exciting to talk about energy transition strategy and data center growth. That's with the booming of cloud computing, AI. This is a very important topic for us, actually. And I think that we, across the regions between Europe and the US, we have distinct narratives. As Tom has mentioned, the US is more driven by business, whereas in Europe, we are the primary driver is more regulations, actually. And then when it comes to getting power capacity for our expansion, we need to deal with different rules and regulations per country. Most of the TSOs and DSOs, so transmission and distribution operators, are state-owned, and then it makes things very complicated. So we have to work around hurdles such as policy uncertainty from one country to another, and also planning permission. Sometimes we get the permitting very late, and it can make or break actually a deal when it comes to data center expansion.
And Tom, how does that measure up, I guess, in the US? You touched on it a bit earlier.
Yeah, I mean, certainly energy is a key driver, in many cases, the primary driver with data center growth. As VT said, it tends to be more on the commercial side. We'll talk a little bit more about regulatory issues in the US, but the primary drivers are getting power, and not just the cost, which is the biggest cost for the data centers, but the timing and availability of supply is critical, and that's going to depend, and it's helping, it's driving people critically where they locate based on what the power supply situation is in the given area.
And I guess that's the same for you, VT. Your investment decisions are made on the substation.
Exactly. So the not so long ago, actually, we are talking about 10 years, which seems very short, but in our sector, it sounds like prehistoric times. We used to pick the location for our data center expansion very close to connectivity networks, so very close to metro areas near fibers. And then we had plenty of power capacity, land as well to expand and to develop data centers, if you will. But now this is the other way around. So now the demand for AI and for data center expansion has totally exploded. We're not talking about 10 megawatt data centers anymore. We are talking about 100 megawatt data centers. So the need to find not only land, but also the available power capacity will be leading to us actually to pick locations where the power and land are available. So we have to go to these places as opposed to we are going to somewhere for connectivity and get power and that power to come to us. We need to go where the power is available and land as well, and then get the connectivity providers come to us actually. So the shift has totally changed in the last couple of years.
Maybe we could jump on then, VT, in that light to on-site or nearby energy generation behind the meter solutions. So how does that fit with Digital Realty's strategy in Europe?
Yeah, so we need to be much more proactive now. We have to so the wholesale, I mean the conventional power contracting and wholesale hedging is not sufficient anymore. We have to secure long-term availability and also long-term energy rates. We have to be more proactive, and then we need to combine as well, along with possibly on-site generation in the future. For the time being, this is not the case yet. But PPAs, obviously, we don't have PPAs in place, but we are assessing very strongly, battery storage as well, and possibly demand response solutions.
And what are the hurdles, I suppose, to on-site generation? Is it just simply your experience, the availability of the technologies, or are they regulatory barriers?
No, this is mainly the land, the space capacity. So when we pick the land, actually we want to use the land to optimize the space and turn the land into a white space. So to have a lot of, IT space, if you will. So we have very limited land left actually to allow on-site power generation. I'm describing the situation right now because, as I told you, we are in Europe, in EMEA, actually located near metros. But maybe in the near future, where we will be going to places where we have a lot of land, maybe we can allow on-site generation.
Got it. And Tom, I mean, there's a bit more space in the US. How does what VT's described match up with your experience?
Yeah, no, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I mean, an interesting development here is that we are seeing efforts at co-locating data centers with power plants, and it's maybe the reverse of what you might think. Because we have such a power constraint, we're tending to see people trying to locate data centers at the site of a power plant in order to try to get a behind the meter solution if possible. Now, it's behind the meter is a little more challenging maybe than it sounds. For one, reliability. We really haven't seen islanding at this point of a data center because if the data center is behind the meter and it's islanded, well, then if the power plant is off, then the data center's off, and most of the data center operators need very high degrees of reliability, so they need backup power supply. And then that can be done, and it is being done with some behind the meter solutions. But there are some regulatory challenges to that, because the local utility, you're still grid connected, and the local utility has to provide the power. And it's not so simple for the utility to just provide backup power if it's mostly being provided the capacity from a behind the meter source. So there are significant challenges, but it is being done. Not only with really with all types of generation. We've seen it with wind and solar, even though the load fluctuates significantly and needs a lot of support from the grid. But also people are looking at it with nuclear and gas-fired projects as well.
And VT, I mean, how does that fit with you? I suppose the context is from a European data center industry perspective. We often look at the US as a model for where Europe might go. Is that what do you speak to your US colleagues about this sort of thing and identify where the future is in Europe?
We do actually. My boss is based in the US, so I speak to the to the US colleagues very often, obviously. Yeah, it has always been the case in our sector. What we see being developed in the US will eventually happen in Europe. So that in Europe we're not very early adapters, so we want to see things getting more mature in the US, and then 6 months, maybe a year later, will happen in Europe for sure. We are also assessing actually the maybe SMRs, small modular reactors, nuclear in Europe. There are plenty of projects around the globe at the moment, probably 80 projects or so, being developed everywhere. It is yet to be deployed probably in 10 years time or something, but we are assessing all of the situations. And then, as I told you, the demand response solution is being scrutinized by our colleagues in the US, and we will probably will come to that in Europe as well at some point.
And I suppose, do you see? I mean, we've seen islanded generation in the Republic of Ireland near Dublin, where the constraints have just been so great that there's been no other option. In Europe, do you see islanded generation as an interim solution, whether to SMR or just simply to the public grid, but when that connection is going to be some way in the future, or do you think the reliability that Tom mentioned is insufficient for it even to be a bridge?
Reliability should be fine because we in all of our data centers we have generators, so this is a main source of power, if you will. It can take over the side load, no issues with that. SMRs, I don't know where that will bring us because we are talking about this post the invasion of Ukraine. Obviously, people are more reliable. Actually, they want a more reliable source of power. But then it is still nuclear power. So in a lot of mines in Europe, it does not sound very good, actually, politically speaking. So we see about that. But then the island solution that you have described for Ireland, we are also looking to this, not only for Ireland, but in the FLAP-D markets. So FLAP-D standing for Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, and Dublin, obviously. We will need to come to that as well for some metros or some markets, and then we will be working in conjunction with the local DSO, distribution system operators, and TSOs to make it workable. But we are really assessing all of the options that we have on the table to be able to expand and to be able to meet actually the request, the high request of power capacity from our customers.
Great, thank you. Circling back then just to the regulatory point, you've got big ambitions in Europe, appreciating it's a very fragmented regulatory market as well. But what would you say are the key regulatory barriers that you could really do with being removed, adjusted, and so on?
It is, well, it is grid constraints, obviously, and also environmental permitting. These are the main hurdles. And then on one hand, you see that the French President Emmanuel Macron has announced last February that France will be investing 109 billion of euros into developing AI. But then this is one announcement, one political announcement. And on the other hand, you have the TSO coming back to us and say that, hey, guys, we don't have enough capacity for you to develop data centers. So this is totally imbalanced, actually. So I think that we need the coordinations of all the politicians and all the policies in Europe. Obviously, this is one, and this, how this is very difficult in the European Union because we have so many member states and different regulations. So then grid constraints, environmental policy, and also planning permission, to be able to build. So these are the three main obstacles that we have to work around.
Great, thanks. And just to wrap it up on that topic, Tom, what about the regulatory barriers in the US?
Yeah, in concept, quite similar. Interconnection queues for new generation are still quite long, and so getting the power on site, not on site, but getting the power developed to meet the load is a significant hurdle. And then many utilities are regulated here and by states. And there is a lot of local opposition right now to data centers. There's concern over cost shifting to the other ratepayers. And so these large loads are getting increasing scrutiny by state regulatory commissions, and the transactions need approval. So that's another regulatory concern.
Great, thank you. VT, if it's okay, move on to supply. And I wondered, could you just outline a little bit about Digital Realty's renewable supply strategy?
Yeah, so this is very clear. So we aim to match 100% of our consumption with renewables. This is already the case in Europe for since day one, actually, since a very long time. And then globally, we are roughly 75% covered. So that means like 185% or so data center. Sorry, 185 data centers, pretty much with renewables. So we do that via RECs, renewable energy certificates that we call GOs, guarantees of origin in Europe. And also we have signed PPAs across different markets, wind, on-site wind, off-site wind, or hydro or solar PPAs. And then we have also green tariffs in our supply contracts. So thanks to all of this, actually, we have been able to match 100% of our consumption in EMEA on annual basis, and then 75% globally, and the aim is to be 100% everywhere.
And do you see a different strategy? I mean, you talked about Europe being perhaps the most successful in that sense, but is there a different strategy to the extent you can talk about it in the US? Is it more challenging to procure renewable energy then?
I will need to talk to my colleague in the US actually for the details. But in Europe, this is difficult. This is difficult. I'm going to tell you why. For instance, we have seen a lot of offers in Spain, right, for solar PPAs. But then where you have a lot of production, we don't have a lot of consumption. So in terms of operation of Digital Realty in Spain, this is a small market for us. Whereas we in the bigger markets like the FLAP-D regions that I have told you, we would want to have to sign more PPAs. And in these markets, actually, it is more challenging to get enough capacity, and also to get a viable, commercially viable PPA. So we are always looking into PPAs to develop in these markets, and the aim still is this is 100% match on annual basis, but the aim for us is to increase the ratio of PPAs in our mix.
Great, thanks. Tom, I'm going to ask you to speak about the US market. in just a moment, but just for everybody listening, if you'd like to raise a question, we'll have just a minute or two in the next couple of minutes. So please do fire something into the chat if you'd like to. Tom, back to renewables. How does what VT described in Europe match up with your experience in the US?
Yeah, the U.S. market is really quite varied in terms of renewables. We're still seeing the big hyperscalers who are driving a lot of the demand. Those like Amazon, Meta, Google, Microsoft. They all have carbon-free commitments, and so they are driving a lot of that. Whereas many of the other developers don't have those commitments, and everybody is first and foremost just looking for power right now. So some of the big hyperscalers are still focused on carbon-free energy. I think if there's one move in the market we've seen there, some have gone from really looking at 100% renewable to carbon-free and being more open to nuclear or hydro or even carbon capture. But ultimately, they are, at least now, still sticking to the requirements. Whereas others are really just trying to get power. And even those hyperscalers, in many cases, are saying power first, green power later. And so there's definitely some strategies where a lot of the developers are going to get power and then enter into VPPAs, for example, later to green up, if you will, that power. And there's other strategies involving bringing your own power, which are focused on renewables. But again, there's just a really wide variety. And again, what I would reiterate is right now, the focus is much more on get power than it is get renewable power.
Great, thank you. I'm just conscious of time, and we've got a couple of questions. So one from Henry Dupont, many thanks. He says, easier said than done, but would deregulation of transmissions in the US create easier investment and an alleviation of power constraints? I think that's probably for you, Tom.
Yeah, I would focus on the easier said than done. I mean, I think yes. I think that's been an effort that has been in the works for a long time and remains in the works. I do think our interconnection process is very difficult and creates some constraints for sure. But fixing it has not proven simple, and there are some efforts underway. But I do think it's going to take time.
And then maybe VT, just in the last 60 seconds or so, a digital realty willing to permit curtailment of power supply at peak demand times, given the backup generation on site?
We are willing to do this, and we wish to do that very soon, but there are a few obstacles, actually, obviously. One is the operational obstacle, and the other one is the contractual obligations with our customers. So our customers want us to dedicate 100% of our infrastructure to serve their needs. And then if we need to start our generators and then feed the grid back, that would be a different matter. So we need to educate our customers at some point that there will be the new trend, obviously, that we need to contribute to stabilizing the grid, and also the operational obstacle is that that the grid would want to start the genset without going through us, and this is something that we will probably not allow that very soon. So we need to work on this issue as well, and we keep talking. We have started to talk to the DSO, TSOs, and we keep doing so as well. And but we are sure, we are very willing to put that in place.
Brilliant. Thank you. Look, there are one or two final questions in the chat. Thank you so much. Given that we are at the bottom of the hour, we will wrap up there. VT, thank you so much for joining us. Tom, likewise, and Alex for an excellent opening presentation. Thank you everyone else who's dialed in to listen. Please follow Evershed Sutherland Energy on LinkedIn if you don't already, for future energy transition updates, including events. And as mentioned at the start, the session has been recorded and will be sent to you as soon as we can. Please keep an eye out for the next session in the energy transition series, and we hope you can join us again. Thank you.